Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with a knife video. Today I've got a pretty cool blade. This is the CRKT Deviation. It is a new for 2015 blade from them. And it's a collaboration knife, which I definitely like, and CRKT does that a lot. But it's not from a guy you hear a lot about. You know, this is not a, it's not from Brian Ty, it's not from Ken Onion or Liang Ma or Rick Hinder. This is from Terry Renner. You can Google him and I think you'll find his website pretty easily, and you'll certainly find the X model, I believe, which this is modeled after. Pretty cool looking blade, definitely different than what we're normally used to seeing in a folding knife. However, having said that, it's actually pretty comfortable and reasonably functional. Generally speaking, this is, a good blade. It works well, it cuts well in a general sense. There will be some specific things that I want to hit on as we go through. But there you go, that is the CRKT Deviation, which we're going to spend a little time talking about here right now. We'll start with size and weight, which is where we often start. This knife is just over 7.5 inches overall, so about a 16th of an inch bigger, so 7 9/16. It has a 3 1/8 inch blade, 3 1/8 inches, 3-inch cutting edge, and a 4 7/16 inch handle. Okay, so that's just over 3/8 of an inch. Now, when it's closed, it's just over 4 3/8. So it's not a huge knife. In fact, it's not even a big knife. As you guys know, I like to see blades that are 8 inches. A couple quick size comparisons. Here's a Kershaw Blur. You can see that the deviation is just about a 1/4 or an 1/8 of an inch shorter than the Blur. And actually I should have had this out of my pocket, but my EDC today is the Tenacious, and there they are together. It's almost the same size as the Tenacious. Now I will say that in terms of comparison, the Tenacious has a lot of cutting edge. The Deviation has a relatively little amount of cutting edge, partially because of this extra choil up here, which does really allow you to choke up on the knife. Okay, so quickly, again, those numbers are basically just over 7.5 inches, 3 1/8 inch blade, and 4 3/8 inch handle. Now, all of that for a fairly small blade, this weighs 5.9 ounces. Okay, so that's almost 6 ounces. So it's a very, very hefty blade. Like, it's a lot heavier than the Blur, a lot heavier than the Tenacious, almost 2 ounces heavier than those. All right, so the weight on this may be a bit of an issue. And I will say this, by way of explanation, I'm not trying to forgive a knife that I believe is a little too heavy, but it is stainless steel frame lock. Okay, so look at the thickness of the steel scales here, or the steel frame. It's a pretty thick piece of steel, and you got 2 of them there, and so you would expect this to be fairly heavy. And a lot of the weight in this case, I've showed you knives before where I've said, hey, a lot of the weight's in the blade. This is the opposite. It's very handle heavy. Okay, so just looking at the amount of stainless steel here, it kind of explains where that 6 ounces of weight is coming from. Now let's talk about the blade, because I think the blade is actually a real win, even though it is only a so-so cutter. Okay, gorgeous looking blade. I'm going to zoom in actually for this part, because I want to be able to show you some things a little closer up. Let's go, there we go. And I can lean back and get my face out of there. So there you go. There's the blade on the CRKT Deviation. You can see this beautiful mirror polish and almost equal size of swedge and blade grind. So I think aesthetically that works really, really well. Got it? So the way the knife looks, this mirror polished swedge being nearly the same size as the cutting edge, it looks really, really sharp, no question. However, although it looks really good, it creates a bit of a problem for cutting, because now you have a very abrupt angle. Okay, so had they ground this It is a hollow grind. Had they taken the grind up to, okay, see the bottom of you can see the CRKT logo there. If they had taken that all the way up to, let's say, the bottom of those letters and ground it out that way, the grind would be much higher, making it a much better slicer, okay? Now what they've done here is sacrificed a little bit of function in favor of form. It looks awesome this way, so the form is really, really cool, but they've sacrificed just a little bit of function on that. Now I will say, most of the cutting tasks we do with our EDC knives don't require, it's not like we're cutting a lot of vegetables or apples up. I did cut a bunch of apples with just this just to test, and it does tend to do exactly what I figured it would do, which is split them. So you basically start the cut and the apple breaks in half because this angle is so steep. All right, so you have a fairly abrupt hollow grind. Now, on the other hand, let's talk about the rest of the blade. It is gorgeous. You've got this satin grind finish here on the flat, and then the ground portion is this beautiful mirror polish, and they have done a great job on this. I'm not sure how in a production setting they have finished this knife, but it is really well done, with one glaring problem, and here's one of the issues with a mirror polish. Every mistake really stands out. And so if I put my finger here, you'll probably see it right away. I won't even have to say, but see how the grind here is not perfectly straight. It's even worse on this side. See the grind, how it's kind of wobbly here at the bottom portion especially. That's not what I'd like to see, especially in a knife from CRKT, who generally, all my other CRKTs are really well done. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, they've done something really right, and that is here where they've cut out this finger choil. The blade, the grind here, the secondary bevel terminates really cleanly and nicely, and I'd like to see that on a lot more knives. The angular, sort of shape of this blade makes it look like it would be uncomfortable, but when you get it in hand, even in this choked up position, the finger choil here works really well, and this little thumb cutout is extremely functional as well. So you see how your thumb just kind of drops right into that little angle, and it works really nicely, even for fairly tough cutting tasks. And I will say this is going to be a pretty robust knife. I'm going to back off just a bit because I want you to be able to see the whole knife. There we go. This is going to be a very robust knife. Like, the whole thing is stainless steel. You got stainless steel, stainless steel, stainless steel. Like, it's all solid steel construction, so it's going to be pretty strong. However, all of that steel does make weight become an issue, okay? So that's where the challenges come with this blade. It's primarily around weight, and the reason it becomes such a challenge is, I think, you look at this blade size and this blade shape, even the finishes on it, and this knife immediately, in my mind, gets classed as a gentleman's folder. Okay, I think CRKT says best use is EDC. Yeah, somewhat true, but I think this is a knife that's leaning more towards something you'd carry at the office, something you'd carry in a suit pocket, or a pair of slacks, or dress pants. The problem is it's too heavy for that. Okay, so you've got a blade that is quite functional, and I mean, as long as you're not trying to slice through any kind of a medium. I use cheese as an example all the time. This is not a good cheese cutter. As long as you're not trying to cut through any kind of a medium, this blade works just fine. As soon as you try to deal with something that's a little thicker, let's say you're cutting 2 or 3 pieces of cardboard and you're going to kind of cut down through it, you're going to have issues. This knife is going to want to bind up on you. Okay. Otherwise, it does work very well. It comes razor sharp, and that's always a plus. And of course, it has that beautiful mirror polish, which I think looks absolutely gorgeous and really goes well with the overall flow of the knife. Let's go on to lockup and deployment. It is a flipper, and it flips really well. I think it's like $44 on Blade HQ, which is a very pretty budget-friendly knife. And it has IKBS. You can see the IKBS symbol right here under my finger. Now, that's again in the win category. You know, if you're someone who says, hey, you know, I don't spend a lot of money on my knives, you know, I have this, maybe you shoot for that $50 price point or so. Most ball bearing pivot knives are going to be over $100. So it's pretty cool that this knife and a couple of other CRKTs, I can't remember if the Shenanigan has it, but I know the Tirade has ball bearing pivot system. This knife has ball bearing pivot system, and they're all, you know, around that $40 price point, which is pretty reasonable. And it's cool to see that system on a knife for that price point. Now, again, I'm kind of on the fence about what I think of ball bearings. You know, it's cool that they flip really nice, and if you like the action and you sit here and flip your knife all day, I think you're going to love ball bearing pivot. If you use your knife, especially if you're in a dirty setting, let's say you work in construction or in a warehouse, or you know, something where dirt and grime and crap could get into the pivot, you may prefer, you know, the more standard phosphor bronze bushings or even Teflon bushings. Okay, now we've done the blade. As I said, functional, beautiful, not the best slicer. Let's move on, and now we're talking about deployment. Deploys really quickly. It is a great flipper. That's the only method though. Notice there's no thumb studs, nothing of any kind. In fact, because of the swedge, even to try and get this two-handed, it works, but there's not a whole lot to grab onto. It's sort of flipper or nothing. And that was my bad. It does flip really nicely, and it flips either way. You can light switch this, or you can push button it. Push button probably works just a little bit better. Although, here's a complaint I do have. Look how pointy this flipper is. It's quite small and quite pointy, which is a bit of a problem for me. Now, the lock is a liner lock, although it's different than a lot of liner locks that you've seen. If you kind of follow this down, I'm going to try to angle it. Let's see here. Okay. Somewhere around there, I'm hoping you can see that the liner lock comes down and is screwed into the frame of the knife. So the way this is actually done is, although it's called a liner lock, it's actually attached to the frame the way a subframe lock is. Okay, and actually I would say they should have probably gone with a subframe lock on this knife, or even in just a standard frame lock, because they could have reduced the weight. I'll talk about that when we get to the handle. But there's where the liner lock is attached to the frame here. It's sort of like the military. You know how the military is done by attaching the liner to the G10 scale or the G10 frame. Same on this, only the frame is stainless steel in this case. And of course the lock is quite functional, and there's no issue with that. It is a little sharp. This edge could maybe be sanded off or buffed off, and you may want to do that, and I may actually do that to this one to make it a little more comfortable to function. You can see that there's some jimping on there, I hope. Good lockup, good deployment, IKBS ball bearing pivot, which is pretty nice, especially for a knife at this price point. Let's go into the handle. I'm going to stay zoomed in because of the fact that this handle is so gorgeous. You can see that, you know, it's got these milled out sections, and all the milled out sections are filled in with a really nice blue. Very, very attractive. This oversized pivot here, which again looks really, really sharp and has those little blue accents to match with the rest of the handle. So great looking blade overall. The issue that I have with this handle is not ergonomic at all. It's quite comfortable in hand. In fact, surprisingly comfortable in hand, considering the way the knife kind of looks, right? Like you look at this and go, man, it looks really angular and weird, but it's actually very, very comfortable. No issue at all with the way this feels in hand. But where I do have an issue is with just the sheer size of this handle. You have a handle that's really bulky with this little tiny blade sticking out is just the impression that it gives. I know that's not entirely accurate. Overall, the balance of the knife in terms of just the look of it is not bad, but the feel in hand is where it kind of gets weird, because it really feels like you've got a lead weight on this end, which you do because you've got these giant pieces of stainless steel and then a very dainty little blade. And so there's a bit of a disconnect in design as far as I'm concerned. This feels like a dainty, classy, lightweight gentleman's folder, but then it weighs way too much to be that, and in hand it doesn't feel like that. The handle is almost bulky in hand. It's kind of beefy in hand, which is sort of weird for the way the knife looks. Okay, so this is where I think they kind of missed it just a little bit. This knife has the look, it has the size, it has the blade shape and the blade look of a gentleman's folder, but then it's got this crazy overbuilt beefy frame. Okay, so it feels in hand like one of the Charade 300 series knives, you know, those stainless steel frame locks that are just overbuilt and heavy. This kind of feels like they feel in hand, even though it's not at all following their design philosophy of being a big, beefy, heavy-built knife. It feels like a big, beefy, heavy-built knife, even though it looks like a dainty, classy gentleman's folder. And so you've got this sort of disconnect there. I think what they should have done is gone with a frame lock design, and then they could have thinned these liners way down. They could have taken, you know, a good 1/16 of an inch off both of these liners, and in that way gotten to a point where it feels the way it's supposed to feel. The feels the way it looks is what I want to say about this, okay? It would feel that way if it was probably in titanium, okay? That would be different. They also could have used aluminum. That would be another way of lightening up this blade. The other option that I would mention is they could have milled the inside of these steel frames, and that way they could have again reduced the weight. So the weight is the biggest issue on this, and the reason it becomes more of an issue, it's not that I feel like 6 ounces is overweight. I have lots of knives that weigh that and I carry them, but it doesn't match the look of the knife. Okay, that's what I'm saying about that. Let's see, what else should I mention on the handle? Sorry to get caught up on that one point, but I do feel like it's a real sort of fail on the part of CRKT here. Lastly is the pocket clip. It is a dual position pocket clip, left side or right side tip up carry. However, here's my issue with it. It's very deep carry, which is nice, but it's so deep that it tends to be hard to extract from your pocket. On a number of occasions, what I've had to do is this kind of thing where you're reaching way in, grabbing this part of the knife and pulling it out of the pocket. If you do this, which is quite normal, you often cannot get it out. And there's a couple things causing that. One is just the amount of size that is, or the amount of space that's available here. It's quite thin. I like that, generally speaking, but this doesn't quite allow good in and out of pocket. The other thing is that where the clip kind of pinches is in one of the indentations, one of the milled out spots on the knife, which means you're doing this kind of thing. You know, you've now got a hole in the frame, and then the pocket clip is fitting into that hole, which is kind of exacerbating that little problem where it doesn't want to come out of your pocket well all the time. So that's my discussion of the handle. I know it was, you know, I need to restate the fact that this handle is beautiful and it is very comfortable. Okay, it just doesn't feel in hand the way I think it should feel, or the way the knife presents itself. It's like if you got into a Ferrari and when you went to drive it, it drove like a school bus. Okay. Now let's kind of back off here. Sorry, guys. Let's back up here and give some overall impressions. Overall, I think this is a nice blade. I think it's kind of cool. And if you are looking at this and you just think, man, that's the most beautiful knife I've ever seen, it is absolutely gorgeous. I would agree with you 100%. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous blade. And I also think if you're a person who, you know, maybe your EDC is a Tenacious or a Blur or something like that, but you want something that you could carry in the office or carry to church or something like that, this would fit the bill. It's just a little heavy for that. I do think it's fairly people friendly. You know, you get this out in public. If anything, people are just going to be interested in it because it looks really cool. I don't think you're going to be upsetting anyone. The blade is not very large. The nice shiny steel just looks pretty, more so than any kind of tactical or combat look at all to this knife. Does not have that sort of sense to it in any way. So pretty people friendly, I think. And it is functional for sure. you know, it's definitely not, there's no aspect of this that I say it doesn't work, okay? The deployment works well, the lock works well, the blade works well, the ergonomics work well. You can actually get quite a bit of cutting done with this. Even the grip, the two options for gripping the knife, they work really well. So all the things that it's trying to do, it certainly does them. The only complaint I would say is it's a little heavy for what you're getting. At 6 ounces, I would expect this to be like 9 inches, right? It's a little too heavy for its size, and it's a little too heavy for what I feel like is its design philosophy. You know, it has the look and feel of a lightweight, gentleman's classy folding knife, but then it has the feel of something that ought to be on a construction site, okay? So that's the only, you know, the only issue I would say. There you go, that's my take on the CRKT Deviation. Very nice blade, very well done in terms of, you know, fit and finish, and in terms of overall aesthetics. Yes, it looks really cool. The only problem is I think it's just not as well executed as it could be. There you go. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you soon.